What up, South by? South by is back. It feels good, right? What have you guys been up to for the last few years? Well, I've been hanging out on this little social audio app called Clubhouse. Show of hands, who's heard of Clubhouse? All right, a decent amount of you. Well, for those who haven't, Clubhouse is an audio social app. So imagine there's a screen on your phone, and it's only voices and little pictures that are 1-inch square of people. And you only hear voices. No filters, no motion, just pure, raw voices. And in every room, there's some speakers, there's some listeners, and you talk. Now, it really pushed the boundaries of my creativity when I was locked inside of what this little social app could do. I would hang out and make friends, I would mentor and help people, but it pushed my boundaries of innovation. So I ran my own version of The Apprentice, I ran a Shark Tank, I ran an American Idol, and I ran The Bachelorette. So somebody got a job, somebody got funded, somebody got a recording contract, and in theory, I should have gotten a date, but we'll leave that one alone. But let me tell you a little bit about the magic of what can happen in social audio. Do you guys remember that comedian Tom Green, right? Silly, slapstick, been in a bunch of movies. He wandered into Clubhouse one night and was sitting in a room by himself. That was the early days of Clubhouse. Now he's hanging up there, so I was like, well, let me join him. So I popped up on stage and we started chatting. I told him a little bit about the features of Clubhouse, onboarded him to some of the societal and community norms, and then he gasped and stopped. And I was like, what's wrong? Now, he had just told me he was living in a camper van in the Joshua Tree Reserve by himself to ride out the pandemic. So I'm thinking he's getting attacked by wolves. He goes, is that D-Nice in the audience? Now, you guys have heard of D-Nice, right? He's the guy who was the DJ on Instagram Live during the pandemic, hosted Club Quarantine, where people would dance in their living room as if it was a DJ party with hundreds of people. But he was broadcasting on IG Live, and we were sitting in our living rooms. People from the Obamas to Halle Berry, millions of people rallied to dance to his music. Well, it turns out D-Nice has actually been on the hip-hop and rap scene for decades. And Tom Green was an early fan, had his first album, and has been following his career the entire time. So now Tom's fangirling out about D-Nice being in the audience, so I invited D-Nice up. And we had this amazing conversation, talked about the history of hip-hop and how we've evolved with it. I mean, Tom Green is giddy, like he's meeting his idol. So we wrapped the conversation, and that in and of itself was legendary, right? Tom Green and D-Nice having a conversation that we were eavesdropping in. Never would have happened. Well, the speed and the authenticity of what could happen from social audio, the next day I get a text from D-Nice, and he says, this is all your fault. And I open it and I click. It's an article from Rolling Stone announcing a collaboration in music between D-Nice and Tom Green. So I got in a little bit of trouble for that. But magic moments like that happened all the time on Clubhouse, and no one could have predicted it. It was the right time and the right place for social audio, a time where the world was really disconnected. So you heard a little bit about my bio. I've spent the past decade doing digital transformation for companies like Nike and Revlon and Estee Lauder, so maybe I'm slightly equipped to help you guys think through the transition into the future of marketing. We need to think about the past, the present, to then be positioned well for the future. Now, let's take it back to the beginning of Web 1, right? The dot-com ages. How many of you said, I will never buy anything online? I think I even said that at one point, right? Remember, that was the days of like going to Netscape to try to figure out how to get on the internet, or going to an internet cafe and buying a card with minutes to get on the internet. Or remember that dial-up modem sound that will forever be etched in our memory, like eeer? And dongles. You had to use a dongle to connect your computer to an Ethernet card to a cable to the wall. And by the way, if you have a MacBook, dongles are back. It's my biggest frustration ever that we're back to dongles, but history repeats itself. But remember, no one was ready to change how they live, right? People said they would never buy anything online. How many times are you using Amazon Prime a week? How many times are we Ubering ourselves, shipping ourselves through the internet? Right? People say online dating, that'll never happen, but 17% of marriages came from online dating. So what we thought not only wasn't possible, but something we would never personally do, within a couple of decades, fundamentally changed. Now, the valuations for these companies who bring us these services, they're skyrocketing to the moon. Nothing we ever could have imagined either. And I'd argue that most of us in this room weren't a part of it. So if we weren't so resistant, if we were more open-minded back then, where could we be? So let's go to Web 2. Web 1 was the era of .com. We all remember that. I'll never buy anything online, and now people are buying diamonds and sports cars. Web 2 is the era of the @social handle, @username. Now, the resistance then was all about, I don't know if I want to put my life on display, or I don't care what that influencer had for breakfast, or they're probably stealing our data. And you're right, all those things are probably true. But there's so much power that can come from the connection of social. I'm going to give you an example from my time at Elizabeth Arden where we use social not just as a tool to connect and form communities, which is what we hear all the time, but how it actually fundamentally can change a business. Now, Elizabeth Arden is a really old beauty brand. It's been around for over 100 years. When I joined in 2015, it was in a massive turnaround, completely in the red, and if we didn't solve it in the next few quarters, the company was going to go into bankruptcy. Kind of a terrible time to take a job, so don't ever do that. But the good thing about going in a turnaround is that they're willing to try new things. So as I looked at the industry, there's a couple of insights that really drove how we were going to approach social differently. Number one, beauty was really early with digital. How-to videos to apply makeup, haul videos on what people bought. Influencers in beauty were early into the digital and social space. The downside of that is that it gets really crowded really quickly. So what did I realize? Well, we needed a way to stand out. When I realized I scrolled my feed and every image of a lipstick on a beautiful bathroom counter looked exactly the same no matter the name of the brand, we have a problem. Beyond that though, social was created for people. We wanted to see what family and friends were doing, not what brands were trying to sell us. It's like if we were at dinner and someone came up to the table and started selling us something right in the middle of our meal. It's completely invasive. So if you've got an industry that's overcrowded in that platform, and you've got a platform that's actually not being used for its origin, there's an opportunity. Now that's macro level. Looking inside at Elizabeth Arden, we looked at the micro level. Definitely some opportunity. Now I mentioned this company's been around for 100 years. No one's really aware of the story. It was really high awareness, but low relevance. High awareness is that everyone's heard of it. I kind of remember that brand. I think my grandmother used it. High awareness, but low relevance in that, oh, I do remember my grandmother using it, and I'm pretty sure it's luxury, but it's my grandmother's luxury. It's nothing I would ever use. So awareness is there, just not relevance. We had to make it cool again. The other really cool thing about this company is that it had an incredible founder that lived 100 years ago, well before her time. She was the first woman on the cover of Time magazine. She marched with suffragettes down Fifth Avenue for the women's right to vote. She sent Victory Red lipstick overseas to women serving in the war. She practiced yoga, she ate clean, she opened the country's first destination wellness spa over 100 years ago. We love founder stories, and we have no idea where this one went. So now you've got a brand that people have heard of while it's not cool, and a cool founder that I would want to be friends with today. So what do you do with that? So we looked at social and brought it back to people. We want to hear from people, not companies. So we said, if Elizabeth Arden were alive today, what would her Instagram look like? Not a company, not a product, a person. Now, she'd probably go by Liz instead of Elizabeth. She wouldn't work or live in a stuffy uptown apartment or office, but she'd be in a cool downtown Manhattan loft where she would work and play in the same space. She'd have really fun friends she was running around town with, doing big things. So we shot everything in social as if she were alive as a fictitious person today, and we were seeing life through her lens, the same way you guys post content on social. So we'd see her morning routine. Of course, there'd be some product on the counter, but we would never be shilling the product. It was just part of her lifestyle. We'd see her friends that she'd be doing things with and going to momentous occasions around New York. Our old tone would have been, welcome to Fashion Week, New York. Thanks for being here by Elizabeth Arden. No one cares. Imagine, though, if fictitious Liz, this woman we aspire to be friends with, to hang with and travel and play with, posts images from the runway of her favorite looks and celebrates Fashion Week as a person. It fundamentally changes the content and the connection with the consumer. We went a step further because I mentioned influencers were really big in beauty, right? But they would sell product and we would run away. Well, these influencers, we not only selected really unusual influencers for beauty, we didn't have them sell product, they were Liz's gal pals. So we had Chelsea Handler, not a typical beauty face, but what a platform. We had Iris Apfel, you know the 100-year-old woman that has the really big glasses, super stylish, right? She was one of the influencers, and they fought me. They said, why would you go so old when we're trying to reach a younger consumer? And I had to explain to the old white men who run a beauty company that age is not literal. It is on the shoulders of these giants from our previous generation that we stand, that allow us to do what we do today. And so thinking about what inspires us is not our peer that happens to have more money, more looks, more travel. It's the women who've changed society for the better. And I remember this, 2017, I was at South by. How many have been, this is not your first South by, right? Raise your hand if you've been to more than one. Okay, there's a few of you. There's actually a lot of new South bys. Okay, so there's a lot of fun musical acts. You'll see this wandering the streets. I saw Lizzo open for Lil Wayne in 2017. I still have the video on my phone. And I said, we need to add Lizzo. She's fabulous. She's still doing what she does now. But in 2017, not a lot of people had heard of her. So they said, too far, Swan, we'll give you Chelsea and Iris, but you can't have Lizzo. But I put my life, my job, my livelihood on the line for that, and it worked. So these influencers that show a much broader, diverse array of beauty, of inner beauty and empowerment, fits entirely with Liz, our founder's mindset, even though she was alive 100 years ago. And by having these influencers be friends of Liz, now we have people in the shot, so it's not just her hands or her apartment. And we have community, we have gal pals, we have a tribe. And so we launched this on starting just with Instagram and a video. And eventually it included everything, things on our website, things in store, but it resonated with consumers. It told them a story they'd never heard, it appealed to their values, and it spoke to them in the most diverse way possible. Now, brands shouldn't have the ability to comment on social culture, but they do. They have an incredible impact. So by doing some of these programs over the past 10 years, Elizabeth Arden, the Desk of Liz, being part of the team that did Dream Crazy at Nike with Colin Kaepernick. If people want digital transformation, if you understand consumers well enough, you can Trojan horse social change within campaigns. How powerful is that? By diversifying the look of beauty, by helping people take a stand and have difficult conversations, brands can help change the world. Now that is an example of how social not only connects communities, can be good or bad, but can transform businesses. That business went from being in the red to 10 consecutive quarters of growth and being bought by Revlon. Real financial impact. So let's go deeper into Web 2, because saving a company with a social media account is pretty cool, right? What else can we do with it? So if we look at the evolution of technology, you started with radio, then we went to TV and got some motion and sound. We got internet, which was lots of that, plus additional graphics, more sound and filters. The next stage in evolution should have been augmented reality and virtual reality in the metaverse, if you look at the stages of growth in technology. Instead, we went to analog voice and radio. That's what Clubhouse was. It was voice only, and we went backwards. But I think innovation needs to happen within context. So think about what happened 2 years ago. We were hit with this pandemic we didn't understand. We were all locked inside. I was still Lysoling my groceries. I had no idea what was coming. So we were disconnected. We were at home by ourselves. So any way to reach out and connect, new friends or old, was a lifeline. Now, 2 years ago, I just left the corporate world. I was a little lost. I mean, I was the global head of digital marketing for Nike. I was so proud of it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have a title to introduce myself with. That's scary. And I was lucky to get on a few public boards, but I was struggling with consulting and trying to figure life out. So I hopped on Clubhouse. My childhood best friend, Parul Singh, who's a VC, said, there's this app that people are hanging out on. You should go check it out. And that became my lifeline. Now, the early days of Clubhouse is not what it is today. You would open the app during the day, and literally a social media app would be empty with 0 users. At night, there might be 30 people who came on, and you'd maybe be in 2-3 rooms, chit-chatting, hanging out, and talking. Now Clubhouse, there's programming, there's titles, there's guest speakers, there's contests. Back then, we were just hanging out, and I loved that because I wanted to feel connected to a community, with it, whether it's new friends or re-engaging with old ones, but I love helping people. And what I realized is that work that I was describing at Elizabeth Arden or at Estee Lauder, that work helps not only companies going through digital transformation, but also startups. And by doing this, where I'm on stage with a few people, but a few hundred or few thousand are listening, it's mentoring at scale. And I fell in love with that. And for me, like I said, I pushed the bounds of creativity a little bit, right? I ran my version of The Apprentice. I was able to hire some interns on Clubhouse, from Clubhouse, while interviewing them live on Clubhouse. And some of them are actually here today. We're still working together. Someone got a recording contract with Chris Martin from Coldplay. When we ran the Shark Tank pitch contest, our funders were the co-founders of Android, Twitch, and Netflix. And 2 companies got funded. So we were able to create something out of nothing when we were locked in our rooms with this little audio app. I mean, I was hooked. But I didn't intend for that to happen. Right? I said none of this could have been predictable, whether it was Clubhouse's success or my own. My social media was completely private up until then. And Clubhouse for me didn't even feel like social media. It felt like being in a room with my friends. So the ability to pivot and lean into something if you're enjoying it, and then maybe sometimes later realizing the impact, it can be equally as powerful. Let me give you an example of a story that still hits me to the heart. In February of 2021, Valentine's Day, and 2 friends of mine, Drew Katoka and Kat Cole, and I decided to host a 24-hour-long charity event on Clubhouse called 24 Hours of Love. I would not recommend, by the way, doing a 24-hour event of any kind, even if you're in your PJs, but we wanted to bring attention back to the real types of love. There's nothing wrong with commercial love on Valentine's Day. We all like cards and chocolates and flowers. But what about conversations of love of the earth, of the arts and sciences, of fellow man? So we decided to do an incredible series of conversations, 24 conversations around the world with some of the biggest names, thinking about the innovations and how we think, live, and play. Our last session I was proud to host was called Beyond the Medals. It was all medaled Olympians, people who've stood on the podiums representing their country with a medal. Now, Olympians are this amazing bunch, and 1 month every 4 years, we celebrate them. They're on the pedestal, we're hearing the national anthem, and we're celebrating their wins. But 3 years and 11 months out of the time, we don't even think about them. So my goal for that conversation was to not talk about the medals, but to talk about the experiences behind the medals. The tax on the body, on the physicality, on the emotion, on the psychology. Imposter syndrome, loneliness, competition. Because as much as we love those medals, there's so much more behind that. So I'm here sitting on stage with these incredible Olympians who won medals and enjoying the conversation, and I see this little icon pop up in the audience. And I click on it, and I was like, is that the real Greg Louganis, or is it an imposter? It was the real Greg Louganis. He'd connected his socials. Greg Louganis is arguably the winningest diver in Olympic medal history. And beyond that, he'd had an incredible journey in his life after having medaled in his Olympic career. He raised his hand, popped up on stage, and it completely up-leveled a conversation in a way I couldn't have imagined. Right? Greg has gone through an incredible journey with his sexuality and his health openly in the public eye. So to hear from him directly what that experience was like, to feel the empathy and to learn from him, there was no one in my network that could have connected any dots to get to him. But I was sitting in a Clubhouse room and he wandered in. That's the power of serendipity and community. Now, there's also something really unique about Clubhouse. Whether it's Twitter Spaces or Green Room, there's a lot of different social audio apps out there. Something is really interesting about the intimacy of audio. When we're on stage, I'm talking to you guys now, I have some notes, I prepped this talk, I definitely had a direction I wanted to go in. But on social audio, most people jump on, and even if in the first few minutes they're trying to be their public self, after a few minutes, you just devolve into who you are. There's no filters, there's no PR whispering in your ear. You are who you are. So when you're talking to Greg Louganis or Oprah or Elon and just listening in the conversation, there is zero filter. And something about that becomes incredibly intimate. And when you have intimacy, that drives connection. Connection then drives community. What is community even made of? I like to think of it on two axes. You need a commonality of purpose meets frequency of touch. You all have to believe in the same thing, but you have to interact often enough to actually feel a part of the community. So let's go through a couple of examples. Women's March, an incredible movement, definitely a commonality of purpose. But we marched a few times and then it went away. I would argue it was an incredible moment in time as well as a movement, but it's not a community. Take Instagram on the flip side. We're on it 20 times a day. Some of you are probably on it right now. We're on it all the time, frequency of touch. But I would argue that it's a platform and not a community. There's lots of sub-communities on it, these tribes that follow fashion or food or travel, but platform, it's a platform, not a community. You don't go to Instagram's account on Instagram and check out what they're doing. So if you want to form community, you have to have that commonality of purpose meets the frequency of touch. And as we evolve forward, you need people to be able to participate, to raise their hand, and not just be told they're part of the community, but to actually participate and be an active part of it. So as we think back to these moments, hearing Elon Musk interview the CEO of Robinhood after all those news had broken, to have Chris Martin actually be on that show where we ran a singing competition and he himself picked the winner, these are sides of people that we've heard about on broadcast media that have been very cultivated and edited. To hear them in an intimate social audio space like they're sitting next to you on the couch, it's pretty mind-blowing. And then NFTs. I would argue that NFTs wouldn't have had a popularization of mass adoption unless for Clubhouse. Some people started talking about it one night, a bunch of people got interested last winter, and it started snowballing. Started from people being curious, learning from others, to hosting incredible launches and drops for these sales. I mean, I've been lucky to host Paris Hilton, Floyd Mayweather, even Edward Snowden to talk about their NFT projects on Clubhouse. I mean, this platform just evolves with us, and it's an incredible thing. And by the way, some of you guys are like, did you say NFTs? You knew I was probably going to go there. Okay, so now let's move into Web3, right? Web 1 was .com. I'll never buy anything online. Web 2 was @social handle. I don't care what that influencer is eating for breakfast. What's Web 3? And for now, I'm calling it the era of, but I can't touch it. Because that's what people always say when we talk about anything digital with art and collectibles, I can't touch it. How many of you guys have heard of Beeple? Just a quick show of hands. Okay. Not that many, so I'm going to walk you through this. Beeple is a digital artist. He creates art, but in a digital form. Last year, he sold a painting, or I shouldn't say a painting, a piece of art that was $69 million, sold through Christie's. What he had done, it's called Every Days, the first 5,000 days. So for every day, for 5,000 days straight, he created one digital piece of art. And at the end of the 5,000 days, 13 and a half years, he amalgamated all those individual daily photos, those pieces of digital art, into one master collage. 13 and a half years of someone's life, and he never missed a day no matter what. Sold for $69 million. How many of you guys think that was worth it? Even fewer hands than have heard of Beeple. It's crazy, right? This digital art that this guy we've never heard of sold for $69 million. But again, does it matter if we can't touch it? Indulge me on this. Take out your phones, unlock them, and open your camera roll. Show me, just hold it up to the stage, show me your favorite photo. And it doesn't have to be the ultimate favorite photo, right? You probably have the top 20, but show me some photos. And if you can't show me, then it should probably be in a hidden folder. Okay, I see some spouses and families, I see vacations, I see pets. All right, those are all really good moments, right? And they're emotional. What if I came down there and took your phone and deleted everything off of it? That'd be a dick move, right? Like, that's not cool. But you can't touch those either. And they matter. They have a sentimental value and possibly a financial value. So getting over the hump of Web3 means that we actually have to erase a lot of preconceived notions about what a thing even is, what ownership is, and what traceability even is. Because those digital photos matter so much to you guys. They're your favorite moments of families and vacations and your favorite things. It may not matter to someone else, but it matters to you, but you still can't touch it. So what I'm not gonna do today is go into a 101 of blockchain or NFTs or crypto. You guys didn't come here for that. But I'm hoping as we talk about the past, present, and future of marketing, that I open your minds to understanding some of the use cases with this technology, because we're on the precipice of changing how we work, live, and play. Now, an NFT, without even worrying about the technical part, is basically a digital record on the blockchain that is authenticated, it shows clear ownership, it's unhackable, and it's universally viewable and accessible. Everyone could see it. So the cool thing on top of that is you can attach something called a smart contract, which basically is a line of code that it tells that NFT that when something happens to go execute this. It happens automatically with no one pushing a button, and it's embedded in that contract into the NFT. So what could this mean? Now, one of the first things that struck me is anything that could be digitized can be put on the blockchain, and it's unhackable and unchangeable. So my mother, for example, grew up with pretty humble beginnings. She was unofficially adopted. They were so poor, there was no formal adoption in Hong Kong back in the days. She's not exactly sure how old she is. Imagine if her birth certificate were on the blockchain and we knew where and when she was born. Or Spotify. We all listen to it every day. Millions of artists are on there. In 2017, there were only 13,000 artists around the world that made more than $50,000 off of Spotify. And that's the average wage in the US. Only 13,000 artists. I think I'm supporting half of those myself, right? We do this every day, but we can't see how things are tracked when they're streamed. So this technology has broad implications across so many different arenas. Even brands are getting into it. So why would they, for example? Let's take Adidas. Adidas launched a really cool project called Into the Metaverse earlier this year. And it was a collaboration with the Bored Ape Yacht Club, which some of you guys might have heard of, with Punk's Comic and G-Money, some other figures in the NFT space. And they sold an Into the Metaverse icon of a blue ape with the Adidas logo. Sold 30,000 of those, and they made $23 million in minutes. 23 million. Do you know how long it takes to sell $23 million worth of shoes? Yeah. That market cap of that project is $100 million. And remember I mentioned those smart contracts, the thing that can be just written into the code? Well, a lot of artists put in royalties. So oftentimes when an artist sells a piece, it goes to the first owner. That's the end of it for the artist. This first owner sells it to the second owner, the second sells it to the third, and every time they're profiting. But the artist never gets a share of that, especially as their fame increases and the value of the art increases with it. They never see a penny of that. Smart contracts let you write into royalties. So every time that Adidas NFT is resold, they get a 10% royalty automatically deposited into their wallet. No one has to hit a button. No one can change it. It is written into the smart contract. Well, there have been $81 million of secondary sales. 10% of that is $8.1 million that Adidas gets just for waking up. It's pretty powerful. Now, I would argue, actually, that's not the reason Adidas did this project. Because while $23 million would be a lot of shoe sales, they don't need it. They're a $16 billion company. I would argue they did it for culture and community. Now, Adidas has always been on the pulse of culture, right? Remember Run DMC back in the day wearing the Adidas iconic tracksuits. It's a part of culture and history, and it's on the pulse of culture. And I would argue also with community, it's like gravity. We know it's there, we can feel it, but we don't really know how to measure it. So we could put together all these social media formulas about reach and awareness and engagement, or you could see who shows up when you put up a community-focused product. When 30,000 people are willing to pay $3,000 to be a part of this club without a clear idea of what's to come, that's how you start seeing one of the measures of how you value community. And other brands are coming in. We've got Budweiser, NBA, McDonald's, Prada, Gucci, Lamborghini, the Grammys, Playboy, and the best collaborations are coming out of this. Barbie and Balmain did an NFT collaboration. So not only is it inspiring brands to come in and connect with consumers, it's inspiring the coolest, unexpected collaborations. And even Nike's in. They bought Artifact, fully bought an NFT company outright, the sneaker company of the metaverse. But I would challenge that it's actually bigger than just a collectible of buying a digital pair of shoes as art. Imagine if Nike could follow the entire life cycle of a shoe, from supply chain to the last owner. So suppose the shoe's made in a factory, and we put an NFC chip in it. It's the same technology that's the Apple Wallet in your phone. Just put it in the shoe, put it so deep in the rubber that you can't get it out unless you ruin the shoe. Now we know where that shoe is, and it's authenticated. We never have to worry about whether that's a fake. Now it goes down the line. You know which factory it was made in, what worker put it together. You might even know the environmental footprint that day of what was used to make that shoe. Then you know which distributor it went to, which truck it fell off to then end up on the black market, making you question whether it was real or not. You know which retailer it went to because Nike has their own stores and their own website, but they have big partnerships with Bloomingdale's and Foot Locker. Those retailers don't share customer data with Nike. So you can track that. You know which customer comes without ruining the relationship with Foot Locker who's selling to your consumer. And then you know whose wallet it's sitting in. You can even connect it to the Nike training or running app to know if they're using the shoe. And even beyond that, I mean, you guys know about the hot, high heat shoe drops, right? The Nike sneakers app, that's where all the cool shoes are dropped. But it's Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Pacific. If you have means, you're not waking up at 7 a.m. to click on 7 devices hoping that you'll win. You're not lining up and sleeping in the rain outside for 3 days for that shoe. If you have means, you're going to the aftermarket sites like GOAT or StockX. You may pay 10 times more for them, but time is value for you. Time is money. Nike has no idea who those consumers are. So imagine if I could look in a wallet and I see there's 30 pair of rare Jordans in someone's wallet, but it was all marketed or all acquired through aftermarket sites or resellers. I'm not going to take away those relationships necessarily, but how cool would it be if I was able to drop something that says, thanks for being such a loyal fan of Jordans, we'd love to give you something special for being a part of our community. So the implications might be with collectibles and online digital art right now, but that's the entry point. The implications, far, far broader. It's also social implications. I can Venmo you guys at midnight any amount of money pretty much I want. But after 5 p.m., I can't wire you money because a bank decided to close. It's not like somebody's there hitting the button to wire you guys the money. That's absurd. Or if you live paycheck to paycheck, the way our systems are set up is that you get your paycheck every 2 or 4 weeks. And budgeting every day up till then is really challenging for some people. Imagine if you got a fractional paycheck every day that was not only a fraction of your work that you could then go spend the money, but you could actually get a bonus because your customers loved you that day and you deserve more instead of waiting once a year for your job or your boss to give you a review. You could take that money on the way home, buy dinner for your kids, and it's yours. If you're still doing that paycheck to paycheck thing, imagine if you're paying rent and you write a check, but your boss leaves for vacation early and forgets to run payroll. You get a fee of $30 for a bounced check when the money was actually already on its way to you. These are constructs of Web 2 that, let's face it, they're not technology problems, right? They're procedure problems with some of the organizations that we work with. But if they're not going to change, then let's come up with our solutions. Let's take another example for the music industry. Remember I said with the challenges of Spotify, right? So few artists make real money on it. Well, there's an EDM DJ named Blau. His first NFT drop, he's not even signed to a label, but he made $8 million. But he took that money, is now starting a company called Royal. And it allows you to buy an NFT that gives you a fractional ownership of the revenue from the streams of that song. So their first big launch was with the artist Nas. So if you bought an NFT, every time that song is streamed, you get a fractional revenue payment for that song being listened to. It's not a big Web2 company earning it, it's directly from the artist into your wallet. That's pretty cool, right? You talk about D2C and true fan engagement and direct connections, that's the best way to do it. And there's so many more models evolving. I mean, imagine if we'd been on that stage with D-Nice and Tom Green and we had Royal. We literally could have put together an NFT and sold it to the people in the audience who were there for that moment, and everyone would have had a stake in that going forward. And the possibilities are endless. Like ticket stubs. All my ticket stubs are in a shoebox in the back of my parents' closet somewhere in storage. Now we have digital tickets that once we use them, they go away. But I would argue those souvenirs are artifacts of our lives. Why shouldn't those be in a wallet online commemorated forever? Land deeds, luxury goods authentication, rewarding fandom, fractional art or memberships. If I have a Rent the Runway clothing membership and I'm abroad and I can't use it, why shouldn't I be able to rent it out to somebody else for a few months? The possibility with the technology that's universal and trackable is endless. The biggest change to this, though, I think, is going to be data back in the hands of a consumer. Not only is this the best 360 view of a consumer, right? Because Netflix knows what we watch, Uber knows where we go, Amazon knows what we buy. They own our data, it's siloed, so it's not a complete picture, and they're profiting off of it. Your wallet and what you do is now under your control. So imagine that 360 view of truly understanding who you are is in your pocket. Now it's upon brands, it's upon them to give us enough value in exchange for us to share that information. So we've now completely changed ownership of data, putting power back to consumers. So in closing, I want to tell you a story that just happened last night that I was fully embarrassed about, but I think illustrates what we're talking about here. 2 nights ago, I was at a small dinner with some friends commemorating the legacy of Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos. And I was sitting next to this incredible gentleman named Phil, who was very lovely. And we had dinner conversation, not about work, but about Tony's legacy, what we learned, and different styles of leadership. And we enjoyed a great meal. And that was it. Phil was lovely, and then that was it. So last night, I was at the Sandbox event. And Paris Hilton was DJing, and it was a full-on party. And towards the end, Phil comes in, and he's got a bunch of his friends. Now, Phil kind of looks like a boomer, so, we didn't talk about tech, and he comes in, and he's super startled, and his eyes are all wide, and he's like, what's this? And I said, oh, it's kind of the Web3 kids. I mean, Sandbox is this metaverse, which is a virtual world you can go into to interact with people and with things. And you see those avatars on the screens, those are Snoop Dogg's avatars. So you could assume one of those as your identity and go into the metaverse and interact with people, places, and things. He chuckles and he says, we didn't talk about what we do, did we? Which actually is my favorite thing, is to not actually talk about that during dinner. And I said, no, what do you do? And he said, I founded Second Life, the original metaverse. So as I put my foot in my mouth and I take it out, the one thing that's really salient about this is that this is actually not new. If you even opened Second Life before, you've been in a metaverse. If you've played a video game, you've been in a metaverse. So it sounds scary and crazy, but it's actually not any different. In fact, Clubhouse was not that different. I started off saying there's all these incredible stories. It's audio. But the difference about Web3 is that it's distributed and participatory. We can all take part and co-create together. Web1 was .com. Web2 was @social handles. Is Web3.eth? I don't know, it's too soon to tell. But I would encourage all of us to focus on what it can be and not what scares us. So thank you for indulging me, because my personal North Star is to democratize information, access, and opportunity in ways I never had when I was young. And so if I have to Trojan horse some Web3 info into a talk about marketing, so be it, because we are literally on the cusp of a revolution. This is going to change how we live, work, and play. There's so many people at the margins that need to be brought in. 81% of crypto is male, and only 5% of NFT projects are female. We are nowhere close to democratizing it, but by being a founding member of BFF with people like Jamie Schmidt, Britt Morin, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Mila Kunis, we are bringing the opportunity and education to women and to non-binary people. So there is an incredible opportunity for all of us to learn. I'm not saying go buy an NFT now or go buy crypto, just be open to learning. I was one of the first 3,000 people on Clubhouse, one of the first 3,000 people on Facebook, and I didn't do anything about it. I was one of the first 3,000 people on Clubhouse. I did something about it, and it changed my life. What could you do if you were early? Thank you. So we're going to do some Q&A, and because that's my favorite part, and we've actually got 20 minutes. I timed that perfectly. There's some questions up here I'm going to go through, but yeah, submit it through the South by mechanism, and we'll crank through some of these, but let's make it participatory. How did I become one of the most trusted authorities in this space? Wow, that's very generous. You know, being in NFTs and becoming a speaker in this field is actually kind of how I became an accidental creator on Clubhouse. I just wanted to help people, and I always call it like it is. And in any new fields where things are crazy and hectic and unclear, people appreciate the truth. So by collaborating and building community, by using my analytical skills in strategy and marketing and applying it to this Web3 world, but by being honest and patient and generous, that's how I got to where I was. And you know, it's not any different. Web3 seems scary, but if I were to ask somebody, how do I learn how to fly a plane or how to play pickleball? I argue the same mechanics of it, but the biggest thing about Web3 is that it's so new. We're all early. It's like building a plane as you're flying in it. So if you're not collaborative with people, then you might end up in a little island off into the stratosphere of Web3 while everyone else is connected. Because Web3 is an interconnected daisy chain of people and communities. So if you're not collaborating and connecting with people, you might actually be in an island all by yourself. It's a great question. I have a hard time keeping up with blockchain, NFTs, et cetera. How do we keep disadvantaged people from being left behind in Web3? It's a real challenge. I mean, you guys heard the stats that I talked about, right? 81% is men in crypto, and less than 5%, so 95% of NFT projects are men. The reality is that when we hear about things from, you know, vacations to go to or restaurants to try, we generally trust people who look, act, and sound like us. I might read a review somewhere and say, okay, I'll put that on my radar. But if my best friend says, you've got to go try this restaurant, I'm much more likely to do it. The problem is when we're learning about new technologies like Web3, you trust people who look, act, and sound like you, but that's not how viral communities work. I would argue Web 2 is a bunch of white men who did very well. Web 3 is another bunch of white men who are doing well. It's a different group of white men, but it's also still white men. So we need to actually carve out, and I would say I spend probably 30% of my time on this, 70% on projects, but 30% time on educating and sharing. I tell people when they ask me, what would you like to promote about yourself? I'm like, I'm actually not selling anything. But anytime you learn something new or cool, go tell 5 people. And they have to be people who don't act, look, or sound like you. That's the only way this works. And it takes considerable effort. I mentioned BFF. It's an organization with people who are using their enormous reach and network and influence and resources to bring women and non-binary people in. Right? Lots of orgs are forming around like that. Join those. They have resources and people who want to give. And I always tell people who are in the field, if you don't do it out of altruism, do it out of self-preservation. Because blockchain and crypto and NFTs don't work if we have to convert everything back to US dollars to buy a burger or pay rent. It has to truly become a language and a currency, if not a culture, for this to work. So if you're not going to do it to be kind, do it for the fact that this falls apart and it's a house of cards that caves in if we don't have true democratization. So as you're ramping up to this, look for those people who are doing that work. Clubhouse, the rooms that go on about NFTs. Twitter Spaces, the same. There's NFTs, there's crypto, there's blockchain. There's lots of people sharing information. There's also cohorts of learning. When I was in the early days of Clubhouse and I'd only heard about NFTs, I probably would have run the other way. But the person on my left and the person on my right were both excited about them, so we learned together. So you'll realize as you're listening to different rooms and spaces, you'll find other people who want to learn. Bring that courage up and raise your hand and go ask a question. Because if you have a question about that space, there's a very likely probability that 20 other people have that same question. So that's how I even interview. That's how I did well on Clubhouse. I love stories and people, and I'm not afraid to ask the dumb question because I know tons of other people have the same one. So go on the resources. There's also videos on YouTube. There's different newsletters. Like everything on the internet, just because it's there doesn't mean it's true. But if you engage with enough resources and people, you start triangulating to the truth. And the unfortunate but fortunate thing is we're all co-founders of Web3. No one person gets to decide it. We're all building it as we go. So the more you put your hand up and the more you collaborate, not only do you have a better understanding of it, you get to participate in writing the history. What's your response to boardroom Web3 FUD as scary for brands, banks, studios, because there's no longer a need for intermediaries and creating fan clubs on-chain? Those companies should be scared. We don't need intermediaries. Why do we actually need middlemen who not only slow things down, but control data, access, power, and financials? Now, let's be real. We do need some intermediaries. We're not going to go D2C on everything because then it would just be this weird spider web and we'd have no centralization or standardization. But gone are the days of companies who own the data, controlling the flow of it and controlling access. They should be nervous. But what I would argue is they actually should now start pivoting their business models and lean into it. There's no secret that Christie's and Sotheby's went in deep into Web3. They immediately jumped in. Christie's is the one that did that Beeple sale for $69 million. So they pivoted early knowing that there's a whole group of consumers that are buying with a different currency, and there's a whole different class of art, multiple classes of art that are about to emerge into popularity. So yes, there's FUD, but I would argue it's coming from people who are defending positions that arguably should be revolutionized. So I think it's actually best as we move forward for companies and consumers to figure out how to work together. I sit at this intersection where I'm helping Web 2 companies understand Web 3, but I'm also helping Web 3 projects, which are often young kids with really amazing technical skills and big dreams, teaching Web 3 projects to become companies. The intersection of them is where it actually comes forward. That Nike example of not selling a collectible, but actually thinking about following the shoe from supply chain to distributor to retailer to end consumer to another end consumer, that's what brands should be thinking about. And if they got their head around the possibility of what that can create for them, then I don't think actually there'd be any FUD at all. It's just the scariness around this technology and the acronyms and the hype, that's what's getting people a little nervous. And by the way, FUD was used. FUD is an acronym. This industry loves acronyms. FUD stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And you'll often hear it used as like, you know, there's so much FUD around that project, I don't know if I'm going to buy into it, or stop FUDding this project. So people are already using slang. And once you get the little acronym of like, you know, it's a list of acronyms of 30 and you read through them, it's not so scary at all. Your Nike sneaker tracking example sounds cool and innovative, but also a privacy nightmare. That's fair. How do you reconcile Web3 and privacy? So what I mentioned was tracking that shoe, absolutely. But it's actually attached to a wallet that's 64 digits of numbers and letters. There's no personal identifying information on it. And candidly, I have one wallet that has my name on it, that has all my favorite doodles and different projects in it, but I've got a few other wallets. Not to hide anything shady, but just to be smart, because remember I said everything's viewable. I might have these NFT projects in the main wallet because it's an expression of who I am and I want to find other people who love the same projects and things, but my wallet that my Ethereum's sitting in that I use to mint, that's money. I don't know if I want to advertise to people how much is in my bank account. So that one doesn't have my name on it. It's just a string of 64 digits. My third wallet, I keep a little amount of ETH in it, so it's not a bank account, it's my user wallet to go out and mint things, because in any new technology, it's a little unstable, so if you're gonna have a crash, you might want it to be something that's low risk, so I put a little bit in that wallet. My only thing to say this is that main wallet is an expression of who I am and I'm proud to show it. That's a choice. The other wallets, you can see what's in it. There's no lying on the blockchain, but it doesn't have to be attached to who you are unless you're taking money out of the ecosystem. So there's absolutely a valid point that privacy could be an issue, but it's in the hands of the consumer who owns that wallet that decides, not the companies. So I think it's actually an incredible journey to help figure out together, will we be able to capture brand equity as material in the company balance sheet? And I think this is a response to my comment about we can't measure the financial value of community, but we know it's there. And one of the proxies was when Adidas made $23 million on the sale of those NFTs, we had 30,000 people pay $3,000 and just to be a part of that community. I don't think this is a Web3 question. I think capturing brand equity on a balance sheet is something we've been struggling to do for as long as brands have existed. Before the internet, before radio, brands mattered to people, and I don't know if we've ever known how to measure it. But I think we can develop proxies. Like I said, that NFT, right, how much people were willing to pay was certainly interesting. But I was one of the people who wasn't lucky enough to get one, and I would have gladly paid. I actually think we're understating the value of that fandom. So imagine if we can actually assign some sort of value exchange to everything we do. Right now, if you look at a company's loyalty program, they generally give you points if you make a purchase. I would argue that actually loyalty and engagement happens between purchases. Purchases are the visual representation of, hey, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. But I would argue that the brand relationship happens in the moments in between. Do you make a distinction between Web3 and the metaverse? Is Web3 just things enabled by blockchain only? It's a really good question. I said I wasn't getting into the technicals of NFT 101 today, or Web3 101, and nor am I the right person to be speaking about it. But if I had to just simplify it, blockchain is the string of computers and data that are daisy-chained together to distribute and record the ledger of information across the world. That's the blockchain, the exact blockchain itself. And there's a lot of different types of them. There's Bitcoin, there's Ethereum, there's Polygon, but it is the conceptual approach where instead of one server in Web 2, like Amazon server owning all the data, it's lots of daisy-chained computers and lots of blocks of data strung together to hold the world's information. That's the blockchain. The metaverse is the immersive reality we go into. That is where we're creating future worlds where you can fly, or you can erect upside-down buildings, or the Snoop Dogg avatar can ride around on a hoverboard, etc. It could also be, instead of play, it could be where meetings happen. I mean, Zoom is very tiring, it is very 2D, and you're staring at your own face and everyone else's. Well, imagine if it's not a silly avatar running around, which is what sometimes people think of, but it's your work avatar. And you can go into the break room and you see a few friends hanging out, and you can join them. You go into this room and there's a presentation happening, and then it becomes full screen. You go into this area and you see people brainstorming, and you're able to actually whiteboard along with them. It's not just for play. That metaverse is an immersive future reality where we can live, work, and play. And I'm not saying that we're going to spend our entire lives there, right? I think people always complain about the headsets are heavy, and somebody was pitching me a workout app with a headset, and I was like, listen, I love Web3, but I would never work out with a VR headset on. It is sweaty and sticky, and it's going to smell. So I don't think it's practical to think we're always going to live in the metaverse. But in a distributed workforce and distributed lives, how many of us moved around during this pandemic? If there were better tools to actually do things digitally, instead of just a 2D Zoom, but instead there's virtual whiteboards, there's avatars at a concert where you can actually see your favorite celebrity up close and interact with them. That's the metaverse. It's an immersive reality where you can interact with people, places, and things. What I would say Web3 is the overarching umbrella across all of that. Right? The blockchain is the tech, the metaverse is the place you go, NFTs are the assets that you can take in between all these things. You can own the piece of art, or you can take that avatar into a metaverse, but Web3 is the connected, distributed network of which everything will reside. Now, if you ask 10 other people, they might use 10 different definitions, and that's the beauty of Web3, but Web3 is an all-encompassing term to talk about the next revolution of what will happen. Can you have true democratization if governments have the ability to regulate or ban some of these mechanisms? I might be a bit contrarian, and I don't know if we want true full democratization, because some things actually need standards. I don't think we need centralization, but I do think we need interoperability and standardization. Imagine having 6 people in a room trying to sit down to dinner that speaks 6 different languages. It's a mess, right? You might break bread over food and have a laugh, but you can't actually talk to each other. So I don't actually believe it's true decentralization. Now, some people will challenge me. There's definitely some decentralization maxis that think everything should be disconnected and decentralized. I think that actually borders on anarchy and a little bit of mess. So I do think actually right now is an incredible time to collaborate with government officials about how we use the power of this new technology, right? Have you guys ever wondered when you vote whether your ballot ever got counted or went anywhere? It's on the blockchain. You actually know it got counted, and there's no falsifying because it's on the blockchain. We can attach it to a person and an identity, and we know every vote is counted. And gone are the days of we lost the bag in the truck. I mean, that's absurd that in this century that we can't find our votes. So I think there's certain ways for us to help government fix some of the archaic mechanisms that are limiting them from being efficient and transparent. But I do think actually it's a partnership with them. I don't want lack of government. I mean, I think we've seen around the world what can happen when governments go bad. And so I think it's a great time to collaborate. I mean, Andrew Yang just started Lobby 3, which is an NFT project geared towards bringing government and Web3 together to co-develop and create the future. I think some sort of legislation is good. I mean, in the NFT world, the Bored Apes company just bought Meebits and CryptoPunks. Those are the top 2 projects in the entire space that are now one company. For me, that makes me a little nervous. That's antitrust. I wish government were involved in that. So I don't think it's actually a good or bad thing. I think it's a we have to do this together kind of thing. I don't know if true democratization works. I'm excited to see what will happen, but I encourage us all to raise our hands and take part in it. Thank you so much, everyone.